Welcome to the Pander Brothers podcast, where we talk comics, movies, and cross-media storytelling. I'm Arnold.
And I'm Jakob. This episode, we discuss our new follow-up graphic novel, GirlFIEND in Paris, a bloodthirsty bedtime story published by Dark Horse Comics, and the challenges of collaborating during a pandemic lockdown to make something totally new and unexpected. Stick around for insights on working with digital watercolor, writing a graphic novel in rhymed verse, and finding solace in the creative process during times of adversity. All right, welcome back to our podcast and our conversation about GirlFIEND. Today we're going to be talking about GirlFIEND in Paris, the follow-up sequel to our original book, GirlFIEND, and just chatting a little bit about the behind-the-scenes making of the process and just kind of the different approach that we took to this book versus the original one.
Right.
So, yeah. So what?
Well, this was a kind of a journey in itself. It was really 5 years after the first book came out, so 2020. And the first book, ends at a certain point where it really is kind of open-ended. And we thought, well, this is really, there's a lot more to mine here. There's a lot more story that can be explored. And we bounced around a number of ideas around the story world beyond this, kind of urban tale that we'd done in GirlFIEND. So with that in mind, we, started writing really a story that, kind of broke it out into this more international adventure. And so there was a whole process of writing that went into this, where they go next, where the relationship goes next between Karina and Nick, and it takes place in Paris. And that story really sort of ballooned out in a way that, made the story bigger and more, with even more action. But, and we were thinking, well, this could be a great movie. This could be a great original series. This,
Yeah, there was more story to tell. I mean, I think that was the thing about the first book that was really fun, is that we had, focused on these two central characters and their journey, but along the way, we had created all these other characters. We'd had these crazed bikers. Right. We had alluded to this vampire family. We had the damaged homicide detective / vampire hunter.
And his partner, who suddenly now was a believer.
Mm-hmm. They're just kind of transformed through the story. Yeah, I just found that there were all these kind of open-ended characters to start to explore.
The ones that survived.
Yeah, the ones that survived, exactly. So I think that was part of it. And then just kind of throwing our characters into Paris and seeing how we could tell the tale differently, but also recognize the kind of forms that we had explored in the first book that could be kind of built upon in the second iteration.
Right. And that really was about this relationship and the sustainability of this, their sort of, pact, if you will, of hunting criminals, to keep their love alive, to keep it going by, maintaining this new status quo of criminals being on the menu so that, Nick feels ethically, at ease with it. Where the character started to go was this feeling of turning into vigilante, seeing an opportunity for justice because of what had happened in the previous experience with hunting criminals became an opportunity for a way out, for an escape. Now
kind of almost for more selfish ends.
More selfish ends, right. More survival / selfish or self-serving. And now it was about something maybe bigger and beyond that. And that really, I felt like, okay, that's an interesting thing because what could happen there? And we don't want to reveal too much about the story because ultimately we haven't told that story yet because we knew that, that was too big to do another self-produced graphic novel. And we thought, we're going to have to, let's take the book out. Let's, the original book and see if we can, spark something with it so that we'll have this bigger story world to expand upon. And around 2019, we had finished Dissident X, the reboot of that project, And we thought, okay, we got to come back to movies and really get focused on our movie making projects with GirlFIEND at the kind of head of it all. And then a certain pandemic kicked in.
Oh yeah.
And so we were,
Yeah,
suddenly
well, we took a real. I mean,
things
so
changed.
let's talk about that a bit because I think that like everybody, this thing kind of came in like a freight train and just kind of crashed into everybody's world and all of these things that we were kind of used to as our normal daily life. And so for Arnold and I in particular, a lot of it was like collaboration, having a studio together, working together, and all of that. And immediately with the pandemic, it was like full lockdown, shutdown, each one of us in our own homes and really not being able to work together. Also, we had been in the very beginning of starting to kind of spin up a film project that would be a larger film project. And so all of that was also really, we had to shut that momentum down because it was really impractical to try to do that when there were so many unknowns. And so,
And also just the whole idea of shopping GirlFIEND again. And now that, we were focused on making a film, shopping GirlFIEND potentially again in Hollywood and having now that we had a published book and a bigger story world, lined up for it.
so it was really about kind of again reassessing, not well maintaining creative momentum, but adapting to the situation. And in that situation, really, what ended up happening is that Arnold, started to write and refine and start to draw this new book because that was really the most kind of practical, logical thing to be able to do. And so,
Well, yeah.
for the most part, for that first year, you were really writing and drawing at home. Your whole just I hadn't even really touched the book.
Right.
That was really like
Yeah.
spearheaded by you in this scenario. And what was kind of cool is it was also, we had talked about it, what was feasible, and that's where kind of this smaller, shorter, but more beautiful book, being able to do a smaller book, but do it in color, bring in this digital watercolor that you had started experimenting with.
Yeah, the story really was this pretty big, kind of epic, ambitious project to do as a whole graphic novel, what had been written as GirlFIEND in Paris, and we were like, well, that just can't happen right now. And then here I am sitting, yes, at home, brought the Cintiq tablet home, kind of setting up a pseudo studio in my living room, and kind of thinking, there's something here. And I know we had at one point in some brainstorm session or something about GirlFIEND, we had thought, oh, wouldn't it be neat just to do a cool, coffee table book or something kind of like short story or something that's kind of doable that would just, keep the GirlFIEND sort of story world out there and maybe just doing something really elegant and European and
Very
one of the
beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, and sort of influenced by the European comics that we had read, when we were living abroad in the '90s, and so there was a spirit to that we thought, oh, that could really lend itself well to this vampire romance. So with that in mind, or that kind of coming back somehow either in a conversation or maybe just sitting thinking about it, I thought, well, that could be cool, and maybe this is an opportunity for that. And we just kind of take a slice of this story, this bigger story in Paris, and just focus around that as a kind of a tone poem, if you will, and really kind of writing something more like a poem. And at first, it was more like writing a poem in a more sort of informal way, more sort of haiku-like way, maybe even, and not thinking too much about traditional structures, and just playing, having fun with it, with the words and the rhymes, and sometimes it rhymed, sometimes it didn't. So I was definitely taking a more freeform approach to the thing, but also creating a structure, going,
Yeah.
okay, these are the scenes that will happen and contain it within this.
That was the idea that would be expressed in that page or that scene, or
Right. So it did have a kind of, visually, structurally, a kind of a cohesive narrative, and then the words would kind of accentuate that. So, but yes, the kind of also the approach was to keep it really minimal, like 2 panels per page, and more like a storybook. So as that storybook ethic or aesthetic came into it more, it really just became a kind of a much more elegant kind of tale, and a slower kind of tale than what
kind of
we
like, almost like a mix of not like a traditional comic book, or just like a hybrid of that and like what you might read like a children's book that has a big illustration and then a little piece of text that's just like floating in the artwork, or something like that.
Right,
A little storybook feel.
exactly. So the more that kind of became part of the the approach, the more it just became even more focused around that. But it is a hybrid, definitely, because it just the pacing obviously is somewhat adult content. It opens up with a kind of a semi-erotic sequence, and and then there's some violence in it as well. So, but there's these opportunities for these beautiful street scenes in Paris, kind of atmospheric Paris street scenes. So that sort of evolved later when you came into the project. But initially I just kind of every
Rock and
day
rolled
just
that out.
let's just get this going and make something here.
Yeah.
While we're stuck indoors.
Yeah, while we hope the world survives.
Hope the world survives, and kind of just try to make the most of it. And that was really a lot of the inspiration was, how do we make something out of this unfortunate circumstance, and kind of keep focused, really stay focused on something.
Yeah. In a way, it's like a way to stay sane, especially in
Definitely.
that kind of stressful period.
So having that daily routine was really great. And so, and it was really creative, and it was a new challenge to write in a different way. So that once that process sort of, once you started to really see this thing come to life, as the line art, then it was really about, how do we give this, a feel and an atmosphere that is like a storybook. So the watercolor was an exploration of that. And at first started working with a program called Rebel, which had been the program we used on this animation project. And it just felt, it had all this great, effects and different brushes, but it was kind of top heavy, and it was a big learning curve. So I just did I remember kind of going, I'm just going to do some fields of color.
Actual, like, you mean use on paper?
On digital fields of color.
Oh, okay.
And then those felt kind of too processed looking. So I thought, let me just do some watercolor, some fields of watercolor on paper. Yes. So, and I'd been already doing a lot of watercolor, kind of fine art works in watercolor. So that became the basis of the sort of foundation of the executing of the art, of the color phase.
So you would basically take those fields of color and then cut them out and place them into where the skin tones were, or the clothing, and then change the colors of the
essentially. So to do the coloring, I kind of created basically a few different master images of these watercolor textures, scanned those in, and it was actually fields of blue. So the base color was blue. And it's actually one of the reasons, at first, the opening sequence where there's that sort of erotic scene at night, I was turning them into flesh colors and kind of isolating those areas of the figure and changing the colors, which really was kind of the technique for most of it, sort of just doing hue adjustments in those areas as an initial phase. But I kind of didn't like the look of this literal feel for that particular scene. I wanted that opening sequence to feel kind of dreamlike and very moody. So actually left those figures blue. which just added a kind of a
Yeah, it makes it feel like a
interesting-
night scene, like moonlight
Yeah.
kind of feel.
light coming in these windows and what have you. So
Yeah,
that
and it also feels kind of a little bit like corpse-like they're not, you know,
Right.
full living human, but it's got a little bit of that, you know, ghoulish spookiness. Not like it's like scary looking people. It's very elegant and beautiful, but it does have that, like, you know, are these
kind of gothy,
undead gothy vibe.
their skin is, you know, their blood vessels are
Yeah,
chilly.
they're not running hot. They're
Well, sort of. Well, anyway, so yes, so there was a kind of a tone, and also just a desire for this to be a little bit experimental, to not get in this rigid, it has to be a certain way, like just playing around. So in that, kind of found a methodology with the watercolor, and then really found that the most practical way to do it was to kind of in the digital space was to work with those I think they were the Frienden tools, the Frienden brushes.
the Frienden brushes,
And the smudge tools, and kind of manipulate, kind of move the paint around, if you will. The digital.
So what? Just for people that don't know what Frienden brushes are, it's
They're a plug-in for Photoshop, so you can get these various brushes from this. It's I think like $10 or something like that, and you import them into your brush cache in Photoshop, and then suddenly it kind of pops up as more brush options, and the smudge tool would kind of activate this brush, or that's kind of the way I would get to it. But that being the sort of became the hero brush method for sort of moving the base colors around once those were established. So it was scan in the flat real watercolor, isolate those areas that were going to be different colors, and do hue adjustments for each one, which is a very time-consuming process. And then once those were established, go into them on another layer and build out shadows and highlights, and smudge those around, and kind of integrate, so they kind of became organically integrated with the base colors. Right. So that was really this 3 or 4 step process of the coloring phase. And then really now, with the upgrade of the next upgraded Photoshop, those same brushes behave a different way, and I don't know.
You got to update the brushes.
Well, I updated the brushes, and then it made it so it couldn't get that same look, and actually had to go back to an older laptop to
use the older version
so that it would be consistent. Yeah, so I'm not even sure we could replicate that look again. But it was, just a way of controlling the color a little bit more. So it was illustrating with the digital color without having to, deal with the kind of, I love using real watercolor, but there is a slightly chaotic unruliness to it, and to give it a consistent look. So the digital, kind of the hybrid of using some real watercolor and then manipulating it digitally, kind of allowed me to be more consistent throughout. And then you came into the
Then
to
I
the
came
thing.
in
I
and
was
did a
like,
little
well, let's, this is a Pander Brothers project, the GirlFIEND world. So even though I was sort of for a second there going, is this just me? Is this? It really did make sense to bring you in, especially with this opportunity to do these beautiful landscapes and cityscapes, and that's really your, one of your strong suits.
Well, I mean, Paris is such an incredibly beautiful city, and when we were younger, we were fortunate enough to be able to live in Amsterdam for a while in our early 20s, and visit Paris on several occasions, and I really fell in love with just all of this beautiful architecture, and being able to draw all of these, like, just all of the details and the patina and the kind of just the aging of the buildings. They have so much personality and character. So yeah, it was kind of almost like I felt like I was going back to drawing, the style that we were we're really exploring in our book Dissident X kind of carried over into the way the environments were really drawn in this, which was very different and more refined than the way they were drawn in the first GirlFIEND graphic novel, which was a much more kind of like bold, fast, almost like reductive style, very minimal style, whereas the stuff in GirlFIEND in Paris really becomes quite detailed and really small, very small lines, very fine details of just the nuances of the the way in which the design motifs on the buildings are done. So that was really cool to kind of bring that in and really give it almost more of that
And
very
Paris,
classic.
yeah, and Paris has that
illustrated
big
feel.
city feel. Yeah, this right, the illustrated feel, but also
The wet streets and the
yeah, it just was. I mean, that's the great thing about the sort of like these French paintings and some like the French graphic novels, and we were influenced by a lot of European comics doing Dissident X, and the one in particular that I think was kind of at the core of influence for GirlFIEND in Paris was this book called Erotic Opera by Alex Ferrand,
yeah,
and it had these kind of erotic scenes,
but really beautiful, kind of simple, very
very bold,
minimal line work, and these like big swaths of like dark shadow, and then like a sliver of light that would reveal like a portion of the scene or the
Right.
person or the body.
So you might see like two figures copulating, but you really with the only a section of light hitting them, you had to kind of try to make out what was going on.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it
really
really
beautiful work.
very powerful, very original, and then no dialogue or very very sparse dialogue. So erotic opera was certainly like in the back of the mind going into this project, and I had also traveled to Europe, to Paris, on a trip with a girlfriend at a time, like back in 2000, and I guess really got to have that romantic experience there in that city. It was not so much about our early adventures and let's go to Paris and get inspiration, and
Yeah, it was more.
it was a much quieter, much more personal experience, and a really great experience, and it stays with me to this day. But to kind of tap into some of that sort of write what you know, draw what you know, that found its way in as well. So there were kind of these moments in time and influences of the past, and sitting alone in during COVID, and kind of tapping some of these great memories to imbue into the project. So, but yes, so when you came into it, I was like, okay, let's really now look at this as a Pander Brothers, project, and bring in that, like those classical illustrative environments that that are gonna give it that even a more gravitas and
Well, it's always, it's kind of cool. I mean, the nice thing about these landscapes is it puts you in a place, and it puts you in the world starts to feel more real and more realized, and things that get established, like you get a sense of the geography of the world in which the characters are kind of interacting in and stuff. So it's always kind of, I mean, the beauty of this kind of stuff is that it's like magic. It's like a magic trick. It's just illusion, and you are able to kind of put these lines down and suddenly transport the viewer or yourself to a subway, in Paris, by just spending a few hours, like just laying down these lines. So it's super cool. It's a really kind of unique process and way in which to kind of interact with the world, the real world and the imagined world. So, and then
well, then it kind of, so once we were, I can't remember what order, but I do remember, as we were talking about, bringing you into the art side of things, and that process beginning, then it was really about like kind of re-examining the script, re-examining the
I think that
prose.
happened kind of pretty down to the last minute because we had to deliver the book.
We were kind of already like, because it was written. I'm not sure if it had been lettered yet. I don't think it had been lettered yet, but we were pretty much like, okay, locking in the prose
Yeah, I think
and
so
how we
much-
were going to go about them. Were they going to be in boxes? Were they going to be floating? We were kind of talking about that. And in
look of it.
examining it, you know, you had some feedback on it, and I was kind of like, you know, it was sort of an area. I was like, well, I like this sort of organic feel to it. It's as if someone's writing
almost in their diary or something.
Yeah, like she's writing in her diary.
Yeah.
Karina is writing these feelings down, and they're in these kind of written in a kind of a playful,
like
loose
soliloquies
way.
of, you know,
Yeah.
reflective
Yeah, not like a literal diary, but something that is kind of has a sort of
composition to it, or a
little rhymes and some moments that are maybe more personal and more kind of almost conceptual. But then it really kind of became a conversation about what is this book? Is it a, you know, it's a storybook, it's a fairy tale you know, for grown-ups, but it's ultimately that's the genre that we're in here. So let's explore that. And so I was like, do a pass.
What I started to do was just research these different stanza forms and found this one that's called a Spanish quintain or quintillo, which is what stood out to me about that was that it was kind of noted for being used for romantic poems. So it seemed like, oh, that'd be a fitting form for this love story, basically, you know, continuing in Paris. And so, you know, I think I did a few like riffs on the very first opening pages and then sent those to you to kind of go, you know, does this feel like it's kind of working? And I kind of remember you going, wait a minute, you know, like, because it was such a kind of like shift.
It was really radical.
First. Yeah. It was like, what?
Yeah.
But,
well, and that's the nature of collaborating. You know, you kind of, you know, because this one, because I had invested so much into it already and into the writing, it was a little more personal. It was a little tougher to kind of, you know, hand over and have someone else, you know, even though it was you, you know, I'd still felt like, okay, this is a little bit more. I feel a lot more ownership.
Sure,
but
I had to go. Trust me.
Trust me. Your web of trust. So I, you know, so there was a bit of a you know, letting go, letting this process unfold. But yeah, you came back with something that was, as I recall, kind of radical and kind of stripping out some language that was really important, you know, for the sake of adhering to the stanza. But in fundamentally, it was working. But then it was in terms of structure, it was like, okay, this is definitely the direction we want to go. You know,
but it's gotta still work.
Yeah, it's not working with this material yet, and with the writing there. So, and then I remember you found there was another one that had a different sort of metronomic sort of structure. Yeah, and that seemed to be a better fit.
And which then might have actually, I don't know if we just kind of landed on what is the kind of traditional limerick form. I don't even remember, but whatever it was, it was like easy to. It was familiar enough that you could kind of. It felt like a nursery rhyme.
It was more in tune with what was already written.
It's a fun challenge to do that, you know, like to be able to express the idea clearly while having it work within the kind of the strictures of the particular form. And it was really super satisfying to kind of see that all come together.
It actually, I think it elevated the quality of the story, and it also, I think, kind of re-inspired us to take it to the finish line.
I don't even know if this is what ended up in the book, but the ballad rhyme scheme, A-B-A-B or A-B-C-B.
So, for example, he walks alone into the park. I see his blood so bright. He senses something in the dark. This will be his last night.
This will be his last night.
Well, that's up to the reader.
It's up to the reader.
You know.
This will be his last night.
And we do recommend that you read this to someone. It's better if it's read to you, or you read it to
Best read with
a friend.
a friend in need. But anyway, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the story of Girlfiend in Paris. All right, thanks for joining in on the making of Girlfiend in Paris, a bloodthirsty bedtime story, published by Dark Horse Comics. Next episode, we go back in time to the rain-soaked streets of Portland, Oregon in the 1980s, where two kids with dreams of making movies and comics were unknowingly laying the groundwork for their first big break, drawing Matt Wagner's indie comics classic, Grendel, Devil's Legacy. To get notified about new episodes, follow the Pander Bros podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to watch it on our Pander Bros YouTube channel.